Coming up, we take a look why once again Brooklyn Nets GM Sean Marks is in a position of power when it comes to the veteran value currently on the roster and the timeline with which he can live by as the league sorts out what they need and what they're willing to pay for. We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms and let you know that all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and they've got something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, it's that age-old tale of a GM just living and dying by decisions, rising and falling on championship aspirations, and in the end, just kind of still being in a great spot to have success going forward.
Yeah, look, we're still obviously middle of the summer, trending toward the middle of August, waiting to hear as we roll through the Olympics here, which we'll get to later, waiting to hear what's going to end up happening or maybe not happening when it comes to these guys on the Nets roster that are still very much available for trade, probably have a market, but Sean Marks might be towing the line pretty hard at this point about what assets are coming back for these guys. And there's some new reports that say that there's that the list of teams that are interested in, let's say, a Cam Johnson remain pretty long, but Marks, as Sean Marks has wanted to do often in the past, could be and maybe should be in this case holding out for another sort of mini haul for a guy like Cam Johnson. Whether it's realistic or not is unclear, but it doesn't seem like that market for Cam has dried up at all, though it also doesn't appear like anything's imminent, but that could be because Marks has said, no, look, there's teams interested. This guy has a lot of value and we're going to want multiple picks. And that's kind of the story. And we're fine to sit here and wait for you to kind of see the light. And we'll see if that ends up working.
And it's interesting, too, first of all, that you mentioned we will get to the Olympics because Team USA just also living and dying by hopes and prayers and making it all happen as they get past Serbia there and Nikola Jokic. But Sean Marks is, you mentioned being in a position of power, and it's also an interesting one because it's the first time over these last few seasons when he's been a GM that says, this is what I want for this player, and if you don't give it to me, the heck with you. But we also are a team that is fully in the rebuild now that wants to make sure we get that top draft pick. You and I have said on this podcast repeatedly that there's not a huge risk in affecting what your odds are to get one of those top picks by still having these veterans on this roster.
No.
I do wonder, right, on August, as we record this the morning of August 9th, how much of a position of power and how much cool, calm, and collectiveness Sean Marks can show today versus where he'll be on the precipice of October and getting into the regular season, whether we agree or disagree, right? Or how he'll feel at the trade deadline if tragically this team goes out under Jordi Fernandez and wins 1 or 2 or 3 more games than anticipated, then I think things would shift a little bit. So it is interesting to watch where other teams stand right now and how bullish Sean Marks chooses to be in this moment versus where he'll be over the next few months.
Yeah, the original report came from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points, and it's been just sort of aggregated at a couple other places that the Cavs, Kings, Raptors, Magic, Lakers, and Warriors are all still in the Cameron Johnson mix, right? So,
Lovely.
you know, to the degree that those teams are in the mix is unclear. You know, who has reasonable trades to offer? We've been down this road a million times this offseason about like, it's all well and good. These contracts are tradable. But if you want players plus picks, I'm not sure Cameron Johnson we're not sure he reaches the level of, wait, we send out how much for him? I think that he probably falls into that spot. And then where Marks is concerned, you know, just like sort of worrying about whether or not the veterans, you know, like these guys are going to equal more wins on the ledger than the Nets want. I mean, this is not a Lauri Markkanen re-signing with the Jazz situation. That's one where you look at that one, you're like, oh, I mean, he's good, right? Like is that going to help them tank? I mean, they could still do it, but they're not a playoff team in the West and they're going to need to still lose games. So it's not like they're dealing with, I don't think, like that level of talent on their team or anywhere close. And so having these guys just sit on the roster playing NBA rotation minutes, even with some nights off for injury maintenance and stuff like that, it's just not going to be a huge needle mover, even if they went into the season. And I think Marks knows that. Like, he has to know that these guys aren't worth, like, DFS Cameron Johnson, they're not worth like 6 wins or something like that, like at all, right? Or like whatever the number is. And so at that point, yeah, just wait to see who gets desperate. Like, wait till it is in season, maybe, and you're getting toward the trade deadline, and you have a team that just needs needs shooting and a wing defender in Cam Johnson, right? And at that point, I think, especially when the buzz is high around all teams, it's a little easier to facilitate trades like that. Not just during the dead of summer right now, where there's like literally no news except for Olympic stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Because the buzz that happens right now around these players involves a pool of teams that all, in theory, are going to be in the mix when it comes to the season, to whatever degree, full championship aspirations, making the playoffs, etc. So right now, a lot of teams want in, which means maybe they feel like they don't need to offer as much when it comes to assets. Like, technically, there's a bidding war going on, but it's also saying, well, if we can't get you, we can get another player, because there's still other options on the table. When you get to the regular season, the risk reward there is teams fall away. They don't care. They're not going to trade for Cameron Johnson. They don't want to take on $21 million in contract. They don't want to give you asset X, Y, or Z. Or those handful of teams get even more desperate because either you're a team, and we've said this before, Lakers being just an example. It's like, well, the Lakers can't afford to fall away. They can't afford to be a team that just doesn't make the playoffs in, LeBron James' 83rd year in the league. They have to. So they maybe have the impetus to say, well, we'll do what we need to improve this roster. Team like the Raptors, okay, well, do we want to be in the mix? Sure. But if it doesn't work out, we don't need to go too far to accomplish improving our team this season, unless it was the difference of, say, are we about to fall out of the play-in tournament? And maybe that's a goal that they have, not unlike the way the Brooklyn Nets looked at a year ago for themselves. So that's the part of it that I do find fascinating. It's like the power structure lives and dies on the perception of other organizations and where they think they are and what they think they can do. But specifically when it comes to Cameron Johnson, I still stand by that he represents incredible value for a number of teams because of what he is, right? A three-point shooter on the outside. The premise is he has very strong defense. I think it's interesting to look at both him, the way we looked at McHale too, and wonder what the real defensive value was. But sometimes that's about the roster you're on. So I like to think that no matter what happens, his value is kind of situation proof, and Marks will always get there. But we've just seen a lot of iterations of this, a lot of versions of this, where Marks has maybe been too steadfast in his perspective, and it ends up costing you something. And I think that that's going to be 100% true, as we'll discuss here coming up with a Dorian Finney-Smith. Clearly, his value will never reach whatever perceived level it had been at 2 seasons ago. We'll dive into that, and the veteran Dennis Schroeder, who's made quite a name for himself over in the Olympics with Germany, all coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, let you know this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, what are your self-care non-negotiables? Right? Going to the gym, you're not going to skip a leg day. You want to treat therapy the same way. You don't want to skip a therapy day. You got a packed schedule. You got those kids' activities. You got big work projects. I know about all this stuff. It can sometimes be easy to let those priorities slip. You do not want to let that self-care. You do not want to let that sort of just emotional intelligence really slip at all. And that's where BetterHelp can step in. It's like, look, we know what makes us happy. We just got to be able to manage it. We have to lean into it. And this is where BetterHelp gets you started or keeps you going. If you benefited from therapy before, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's time to get in on the mix. If you're thinking of starting therapy, you got to give BetterHelp a try. It's totally online. It's designed to be totally convenient. It's completely flexible. It's 100% suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. You switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. BetterHelp is for you and about you. Never skip a therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get started. You get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, we remind you, we always thank you for making us your first listen of the day. But for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from the national top local experts as well in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA outside of, obviously, Locked On Nets podcast when it comes to us specifically in our fan base. But It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast needs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, and it's every single day. So I do want to get into the values of some of these other players, because I think Cameron Johnson is kind of the golden goose of all this right now. There's Dorian Finney-Smith. I mentioned Dennis Schroeder, but I will also just add in here at a high level, I want to get to the numbers of this and why it also gives additional value to Sean Marks and what he chooses to do. If you dial this forward to another offseason from now, technically Dorian Finney-Smith could pick up that option. I don't know if he will or not. We've kind of batted that around this offseason. Schroeder's a free agent after this year, only a one-year deal on his contract. After that, it's $26 million for Nicholas Claxton. We know extension eligibility for Cam Thomas, for Day'Ron Sharpe, even to a lesser extent. But Cam Johnson would represent the second highest salary going into that salary floor situation. And by the way, again, as it stands, if Dorian Finney-Smith opted out and went to market, if he was still on this team, that'd be it. Nobody else makes over $3.5 million on the Nets roster. So I do wonder if when Sean Marks walks into these negotiations internally or outwardly, he says, yeah, by the way, I'm still going to have to get to a threshold next season when it comes to the salary floor. And do I want to maximize my value now? Do I want to fully turn over to rebuild next year? Sure. But I could also just go ahead and hold on to Cameron Johnson and allow him to fill in some of that salary and go back to the market again next season at the deadline.
Yeah, they've already been reported too as like gonna already setting themselves up to be a dumping ground next season, almost no matter what. Like kind of if they, with the Simmons contract alone, getting off of that like just clears them away of so much money, and they've already signaled and it's already known that like, hey, put it on the Statue of Liberty. Give me your bad contracts. You know what I mean? Like, and just give me your overpaid and hungry or not hungry because we're gonna be able to take.
Give me your overpaid and lazy. We want him. We want him on the bench. We need him on this bench.
But I don't think it like would preclude them too much from like. I don't think having these contracts. I think DFS is a big candidate, especially how we saw this free agent market go down this year. I think he's a big time candidate to pick up that player option. I wonder if that actually hurts his value a little bit too, because
31 years old and the uncertainty of veteran salaries that are being
where
given
we've
out
seen
or
those
not.
veterans, some of these veteran salaries going in the with the especially in the middle tier. It's been a very weird market. I think, like I said, after watching this season unfold, I think he's a strong candidate to pick up that player option. And so, yeah, it's a little, but again, I don't think it moves the needle so much. I still think, like we said at the top, that Marks is in a position of relative power here. It's not like before where it was sort of wishy-washy around unclear when what the team's intentions were going forward. Now that it's so clear, sometimes it's like, oh, well then, that means your negotiating power is reduced because we know exactly what you want. It's like, yeah, you know exactly what I want, but it's like, we don't get harmed by keeping these guys either, right? Like it doesn't hurt us to have a good veteran around that makes some money, that's great in the locker room, all around good guys. Like that doesn't hurt us either. And so you do have to kind of overpay for those guys. So I do find this situation to be slightly different than other times where he's towed the line.
Yeah, and by the way, with Dorian Finney-Smith, with Cameron Johnson on the roster next year, again, extension specifically with Cam Thomas, obviously is going to be something there that we think will eventually get done with him. But it's around $70 million. With those guys on the roster, on their salary cap, they can still be the dumping ground for salaries and still pile it on there in order to get to where they want to, along with all the draft picks that are potentially going to make. And so, to your point, it's like, you can't afford to have those players on your roster a year from now. Yes, I can. Actually, I can do that, and I can have absolutely no concerns about doing that. So that side of it when it comes to those two specific players. The other player then to me is Dennis Schroeder, who's shown incredible value. But when you and I have talked about, we did this last week talking about minutes breakdowns, or earlier this week doing minutes breakdowns, which was a really good episode. You should check it out, guys, if you haven't already. Is unlike the front court where you go, well, we've got these guys. We got Jalen Wilson. We have Noah Clowney. We brought in Zaire Williams on a flyer. Like, we have a lot of bodies that we can go to and look at and want to Trendon Watford, get in the mix here when it comes to the front court. In the back court, it still comes back to this. When we were doing the minutes breakdowns, one of the hardest parts was trying to put guys in any other position than what you automatically would assume, i.e. maybe Cam Thomas plays point guard. Well, if you do that, who's playing alongside of him? And then when you bring in maybe Schroeder off the bench, who plays alongside him? That veteran presence that he is, and in a relatively thin backcourt, that's a more interesting one where I think I wonder what it would take for Sean Marks and the Nets to really care about entertaining trade offers for him anytime before the deadline, when I think his value probably peaks for a half-year rental for a playoff team that wants that extra experience.
Yeah, no, underrated thing I think with Schroeder specifically is in the NBA, when we talk about development, development for positions is different based on, development is different based on which position you play. If you have guys who are like off-ball shooting guards, a la Cam Thomas, or you have guys that are maybe going to be like, rim running / spacing bigs, having a point guard that knows what the hell is going on is like really important. And we've seen teams that don't have this, and it just becomes a total and utter mess. And so when you don't have, if you don't have a point guard and you don't have a wing creator, which they also don't have. I mean, after Schroeder, they don't have either of these guys, or either of these archetypes, like sort of after Schroeder, and you have a shoot first guy in Cam Thomas, who we hope expands, but I mean, clearly, even if he does get a little better, he's still always going to be shoot first. Like that is detrimental to development for the bigs, and I think that like that alone is worth keeping him around. Schroeder, that is, and he's already said that he wants to stay, but. Like, I think that's actually a really underrated thing that sometimes is not really considered. Like, look what happens to some of these teams when they don't have true point guards. Like, the Suns just went out and had to sign one, and they have Devin Booker, Durant, and Bradley Beal on the team. And they're like, hey, we could actually use some guy to organize the offense here because we don't know what's going on when we bring the ball up, right? And so I think that's, like, a little problematic for some of these young teams. We saw this in Orlando, too. It's like, well, who's the point guard? It's like Jalen Suggs. I'm like, well, then now we can get away with it because Paolo's so good and can create in the wing, and you can run like 1-3 or even 3-5 pick and roll with him. But like the Nets just don't have those guys. So anyway, long story short, like when it comes to offensive organization, and especially around development around the bigs, it does pay to have some of these guys that have a clue, that are dribbling the ball up the court. And if they were to get rid of him, they really wouldn't have anybody. Shake Milton. I mean, who's like an NBA point guard on this roster after him? There's really nobody at all. So I know everyone wants to develop these other guys into guys, but just think a little down chain around who else would get affected by not having a point guard around. We would see possibly a stagnation around some of these other dudes.
And we talked about the other day, a player like Day'Ron Sharpe. It's like, I think he's one of the prime examples where he needs that guy at that position in order to maximize whatever his offensive value is.
Claxton does too. I know he's not developing, but like Claxton needs it too. You can't put the ball in these guys' hands. Like they're not spacers. They have to run pick and roll. They have to rim run. Like they have to be able to do this stuff to like really maximize it. And you just need a point guard who understands it. Like Dinwiddie kind of got it. I know that he got X'd out of this, a lot of this stuff last year, but Dinwiddie could do this. They just they chose not to have him do it anymore. And he just had
for reasons we may never know.
But have him stand in the corner all the time. But like these guys, you do kind of need a guy like that. So I think that's the case, honestly, to really not even explore too crazy of a trade market for him, just from a developmental aspect.
Yeah, two different lines here, especially even for a guy who is 30 years old. But the value does matter for this roster, even if you know you're going into a quote unquote tankable season, looking to get that top draft pick. Coming up here in a second, though. Having established that Sean Marks is in a clear position of power, has nothing to worry about, we're going to get 16 first-round picks for all of these players when we choose to trade them. Let's turn our attention over to Paris and the Olympics, where Team USA said, hey, you think this isn't exciting? Hold our proverbial waters as we take the court and set up a scenario that leaves us all as fans saying, my goodness, what a spunky set of guys we have on Team USA. We dive in on the comeback over Serbia to close out next.
Before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, you love sports. We never want them to stop during the summer. Sometimes it can feel like it's slowed down, but as you said, with the Olympics, the aforementioned Olympics, it's keeping the heat on a little bit. You got baseball rolling all summer long. There's stuff going on all summer over on FanDuel. It just keeps the going for whenever you want it, whenever I want it. It's all there. You just got to open up the app and dream up bets whenever you're in the mood. All summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone all summer long. If you go over there right now, our friends in the red, white, and blue, -16 favorites against the home French team. That's right. Those plucky upstart underdog U.S. team, with these guys. I hope these guys all make it. -16 for the gold medal game. Just some of what you can grab over there on FanDuel. Head on over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, so as we wrap up today's Locked On Nets episode, reminder that next week I'm kicking Doug off the pod. I want it to be all about you, the fans. When we talk about the backcourt for the Brooklyn Nets, we're going to have a great episode about Cam Thomas, looking at some of his on-ball stats and how that can translate if we want to see him take that next leap going forward and maybe make Dennis Schroeder obsolete. But in the meantime, make sure you check that out when we get those going all next week long. Team USA, Doug. What a journey. What a journey for these heroes of ours. Can I fast forward to the end before we go to the beginning? This amazing game, and they come back, and what a really fun game to watch. I think there have been some really good ones, even if it's been away from Team USA. However, I always have a hard time wrapping my head around how jubilated the team is and how chest pumping all of these best in the world athletes are after they narrowly claw their way back. And really, for a long time of this game, looked like, okay, I guess recalibrate. One Nikola Jokic and Team Serbia is greater than the best of the NBA from USA.
Yeah, I mean, they did play with their food a little too long here for sure. Yeah. It made it super exciting, and that fourth quarter is as good as sports gets. Like it really
had to build a moment for Steph Curry. That's what it really was about.
I mean, put him on Mount Rushmore. They had to like sort of give them a spot where I think they just had to feel the actual fire underneath them. And it was very clear. There was like so many open threes on Serbia's part. The US team, they're just like, it's a dream team. It's a version of a dream team. It's the best guys. I think sometimes it's probably tough a little bit to get up to like requisite levels when you're this good. And it took them all the way to the fourth quarter to do it. And I'll take it though, because when you can make that team feel like the underdog, when you can take Steph Curry and LeBron James and Kevin Durant and all these guys and make them feel in the moment for like 12 or 10 minutes that they're the underdog and they need to fight all the way. I was all the way bought in. I mean, the sequence of the Curry 3, the LeBron layup, and then the KD ISO sort of nail biter with Noah Eagle, who's done amazing on the call. Like my God, he might be the fourth star of the Olympics. Like he's been so
got
good.
The NBC contracts coming up. Like, watch out, this guy's about to explode.
He crushed it. I mean, all there for all the big moments that don't want to make it. But you had to tie one Nets guy into there. But in general, just from like a sports perspective,
just another Net star doing his thing at the Olympics.
This is what you sign up for, man. Like this is why you watch. Like that fourth quarter is the reason you watch. I was begging my kids could not care less about basketball. They don't know anything. I was begging my kid. I was like, you got to watch this. I mean, she didn't, of course, but like I was like, to walk into the room, you got to watch this. She watched one basket and left, but
walking straight general, going through the living room, up the stairs to the bedroom.
For normal people, it was as good as sports gets, really.
Man, I'll tell you, no, because I was saying to you before we started, I like to go out to my local spots, maybe support the restaurant business. I walked in waiting for my father to get there. And it is also the rare thing, too. Even if you're a Nets fan, even if you're a fan of a specific team in a specific sport, when you go into the local bars, like everyone collectively is not there for this one thing. And I didn't realize that everyone was there for this one thing. Because when I got there, let's just say Team USA was trailing by, 14, and you're wondering what the heck is going on here. And there's nothing. There's no reactions or anything like that. And then as they got back into it, as they start to mount the comeback, all of a sudden you got, with every single bucket, the entire place like jumped up, gave a cheer. Like everyone's like, here we go, Kevin Durant. Like everyone knows all these names. Even if you're a passive basketball fan, you're not going to look on the court and not know every single player that was there for Team USA. So there is something fun about that. And the first, by the way, in beginning of August, the first time in a long time, I've had that, some sports excitement happening around me here as I'm desperately watching, preseason games for the New York Giants last night as well. So it was really cool from that standpoint. And it is also, I think, a reminder, because they said, which is something you can, take to any team, including a rebuilding Nets roster. They said fundamentally, Noah Eagle was mentioning this, they got back to what they are taught by Steve Kerr with Team USA. The general idea is go out, be better than everybody else. Everyone kind of showboat a little bit for yourselves, and we all have a good time. But the other part of it is holding a team to 15 points in the fourth quarter, holding them to a nothing burger from beyond the arc, locking in defensively, getting a little more physical. Something they also said, hey, by NBA standards, you're probably drawing a lot of fouls on the defensive side, but that's not what it is in the Olympics. So they dialed up what I think is their identity. And if you want to fast forward this to winning the gold ultimately, you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to understand, hey, we practice all this stuff so you can put it in your back pocket. And then when we desperately need to call on it, it clicks in for everybody. We get those things done. And then you give, again, Steph Curry the absolute moments of moments to get 36 points in a game when he hadn't scored 29 total leading up to that game.
Yeah, like the FIBA rules and the international rules do level the playing field a little bit. The one and done nature of it levels it too, right? It's like, hey, it's not a 7-game series. 7-game series, the best team is going to mostly pretty much win. Like we're gonna reduce variance pretty heavily over 7 games. Over 1 game though, and you got guys that are just making threes, it can get nail biting even with the best guys. And by slightly shorter quarters helps bad teams too, I think, right? Again, it ups the variance about just reducing the time. Slightly shorter court, so it doesn't it's a little harder to get out in transition. Obviously, the 3-second, the defensive rules around camping guys in the paint means it's gonna be able to you're not gonna be able to just reset. You can camp a guy into the basket, right? And that's gonna make it hard. Scoring at the rim is gonna be significantly harder because of that. Because you can't really space guys out. So all these things, all these rules help the other teams stay in it with a team that's obviously has
down,
so much
the space, just makes it
exactly
more, hey,
all the things you would if you were drawing up. How could we have a slightly better chance to beat all the absolute best guys? These are the exact things you would do, right? Reduce the time, shrink the court, have your tallest guy stand next to the basket, and hope that you hit some threes. That would be the formula. And Serbia almost did it. They almost did it. and it took a Curry performance that, had me standing, which me, buddy. That never happens. We never stand. We never stand up.
Or even possibly lay down most of the time.
Yeah, we don't really gesticulate too much around sports stuff, really at all. And it was just one of those situations where it's like, how can you take the very best guys to ever do something and somehow make it seem like they're the underdog? It's like, well, congrats, we wrote the script, because they actually they're 16-point favorites in the gold medal game, and for 10 minutes it felt like they were the underdog. Congratulations, script writers. It's totally impossible to pull something like that off.
No, it's just it's too good. By the skin of our teeth, we galvanized ourselves. We believe when nobody else did. I think it's those post-game things where it's just so funny. And you hear, I think it was Kevin Durant said, that's, God playing through him when he talks about Steph Curry in the game and the post-game. You're like, hey, totally. But also, this dude has been doing this for, 15 years at the NBA level. We all
top 10 all-time player.
Right. You're like, I don't even know. Honestly, I think I was at it's the end of old school. I blacked out. What happened? You gave the perfect performance when it was absolutely needed. And I will say that, I don't know. I don't get too rah-rah into the Olympics and, rooting for Team USA. But I do end up watching a bit of the Olympics because I'm not a big fan of baseball. And this is on and it's around. And I watched track and field. I watched U.S. sprinters coming out of nowhere and being underdogs and taking things over. Those kind of moments are insane. And it's funny to be able to lump in guys like Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, LeBron James, Joel Embiid, who had some good moments in this one as well after kind of being dragged a bit. When these guys had these kind of moments, because they're all wearing Team USA jerseys, they get lumped in with the same dude that, was projected to finish 5th in the 1500 men's meter and ended up coming in and grabbing silver. You're like, oh my God, they're all in the same squad this year. And it's just really fun. So it's a great time of year and a great opportunity to watch, by the way, the best of the best in USA basketball, we think ultimately go on to win gold.
Oh, you got 3 top 10 all-time guys on your team? Okay, maybe you should win the gold.
We got puncher's chance.
Take it though.
Puncher's chance.
All right, we're gonna get out of here. Like Adam said, Adam's gonna roll solo next week. Nice on him as I step away from the podcast to do just so many exciting things. In the meantime, make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube as well. Let's get those YouTube numbers up to 8,000. That's the goal. Let's get those up to 8K in terms of subscribers. It's totally realistic. Be part of that group. Go subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube.
I'm absolutely an optimist. It's the only way to get through life. That's not Dennis Schroeder. That is Ricky Schroeder.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.